Good afternoon, I'm Josh Binswanger. Welcome to New York Calling. Today and every Thursday, the topic is sports and fitness. And this afternoon, our focus will be on sports psychology and the effect that competitive athletics has not only on professional and amateur athletes, but on children as well. If you play sports or are a parent whose child does, you'll want to stay tuned. As always, we encourage your participation. If you have any questions or comments about our discussion, join us in conversation. 888-TV1 WBIS is our telephone number. Joining me this afternoon are Dr. Tom Ferraro, a sports psychologist experienced in the diagnosis and treatment of professional athletes, Professor Roger Rees, author of the book Lessons of the Locker Room, Michael Corleone, who currently holds the International Boxing Organization's welterweight title and is a client of Dr. Ferraro, and Daniel Gray, a former professional baseball player who also holds a degree in sports management. Welcome to one and all. Nice to have you with us. Dr. Ferraro, let me start with you. Sports psychology is a pretty broad term, so can you clarify some of the terminology and specifically what you do in this particular field?
Yeah, it is a broad term. I think people are growing a little more familiar with it. Basically, you can break it down into two areas. Sports psychology is available to athletes, professional and amateur athletes, to help with various psychological problems: depression, drug abuse, personality disorders, loneliness, these kind of things. And people, I think, understand that. That's how the field started. In addition, it's very much about performance enhancement. There are tools that sports psychology offers to the professional athlete and the amateur athlete to help with focus, to clarify the mind, to clear the mind, so that when there's a clarity of focus, performance is enormously helped, whether that's with a boxer clarifying aggression and freeing his aggression, or a golfer. And basically that's what sports psychology is, those two areas.
Is this a case-by-case situation, or are there certain sports that require more sports psychology to maintain motivation, to help with focus? Is it easier to sort of say, well, one particular sport needs more help in this area, or is it really a case-by-case?
It's an evolving field, and certain sports, individual sports and Olympic sports, are much more open to it. The government has funded sports psychology for individual athletes. Golf is an individual game, boxing is an individual game, and those sports have used sports psychology, and those athletes have used it to enhance their performance. We have football and baseball and basketball and hockey that also use sports psychology, but the technologies haven't been developed quite as intensively and not as carefully in team sports. Team sports are much more, not chaotic, but much more complex, and so it's more difficult to address it, and so it's more in its infancy in those areas.
Michael is a client of yours. Michael, tell us what sort of assistance Dr. Ferraro has given you and why you felt that would be beneficial for you.
Well, so far in my career, I've been able to achieve some of the goals I'm looking for, but I've had problems psychologically. You know, in other words, something was holding me back from getting to where I wanted to be. Thanks to Tom, I've been able to achieve those goals through meditation, counseling.
This is a pretty rise career for you. You got into this 5 years ago.
Yes.
Tell people about it. You were at a festival?
My family is in the clothing business. We have a factory down in Puerto Rico. So once a year, for about a week, they have a festival, a carnival. One day out of that year, they have amateur boxing. So I was enjoying the festival, and they had an amateur superstar down in Puerto Rico that they couldn't find an opponent for. So I volunteered my services. And
was this after 9 margaritas? Was this something you wanted? Like
no,
you walked in and said, "This is what I want to do"?
Just something that I've always enjoyed. I was involved in collegiate style wrestling, track and field. I've always enjoyed the one-on-one, head-to-head competition. So what better way than to get in the boxing ring? I wound up winning by second round TKO. The opponent quit. So some people approached me. It took me about another year before I actually got involved with it. But once I did, I couldn't see or think of doing anything else.
And at what time did you come in contact with Tom, and why did you seek him out? You talked about some of the things that you work on, meditation, focus, but what drew you to him in the first place?
Well, what happened was about 2 years ago, Tom had come to one of my fights he was invited by one of my chiropractor, Dr. Marty Lesson. And he came to me after the fight, and he spoke with me, and he said that, you know, you have a lot of potential, but I can see something's holding you back. why don't I give you some consultation, and you tell me what you think about it. And I've seen such improvement.
We're going to bring in Dan and Roger in just a second. Don't want to feel like you're being shunned at this particular moment. But I want to focus on what you classify as the obsessive compulsive behavior in athletes. And you break that down into 4 different groups: perfectionism, intellectualization, procrastination, and overwork. Can you give us just a quick sketch of those 4 things and why you think this is such a blocking point for athletes?
Well, yeah, any professional athlete or elite athlete is, to one degree or another, obsessive compulsive. They're perfectionistic. They would never have gotten as far as they've gotten unless they were really detail-oriented, intellectual in some way, really highly driven. And so you bring that generally to the top of the pack, so to speak. That's what gets you there. That's what gets you focused. And that's very good news. The bad news with obsessive-compulsive disorder or that kind of personality is that these people tend never to be satisfied with any performance. Michael is that way. He is a very powerful fighter and generally wins all his fights. And after the fight, you will hear negativity coming out of him. And that's typical of the professional athlete. And you can say, well, that's no big deal. It's good to criticize yourself. But if you take that on a moment-to-moment basis and on a day-to-day basis, you have accumulated frustration, depression, anger, which then eventuates into injury proneness and other things.
You have written a book that focuses on sports, the effect it has on society, specifically on kids and young athletes that are sort of discovering athletics and who they are as individuals. And sometimes that pressure that I think Tom is describing and that Michael alluded to is much more difficult for young children. What sorts of things did you discover during the course of putting this book together?
Well, the book really deals broadly with sport, not particularly with professional athletes like Tom's counseling and Mike and Dan here. Generally speaking, it's a broad view of sport, a sociological view of sport, which says that we are sports mad in America, that we live through sports, that we live vicariously through sports, that we invent ourselves through sport, and we invent our traditions through sport, and that tradition is winning. And unless you are an elite athlete, then you tend to get a lot of negative stuff from sport if you can't keep it in perspective. So it's a much broader perspective from the book is from what we've been talking about here.
Right. But in terms of the pressures that we've alluded to so far, the lack of focus, how does that tie in with what you've discovered from this broad spectrum in terms of little kids playing Little League? And we'll talk about that with Dan in just a second. I mean, from parents, from the kids themselves as athletes who want to do better, who want to excel for a number of different reasons.
Well, myself and my colleagues at Adelphi University, where I teach, we run workshops for Little League coaches, primarily with South Queens Little League Association, but with others in the area too. And the whole objective of these workshops is to try to get kids enjoying sports and not to be so preoccupied with the idea of victory all the time, since the models that we see in our society are always models of athletes being victorious and winning. And obviously that's the name of the game in professional sports. But most of the people aren't going to be professional athletes and consequently ought to enjoy the process. I'd want to argue that professional athletes ought to enjoy the process as well, but maybe we can get into that later.
Do you enjoy the process?
I can't think of anything I would rather do. I enjoy going to the gym every day, training. I enjoy the combat. There's nothing I would rather do. If there was, I would be doing it.
If you had not been approached by the people who came up to you after the festival down in Puerto Rico, do you think this is a career that you would have pursued?
Most likely not. Like I said, I was almost 22 years old before I started boxing. I was running a clothing factory of 500 people, and that was what my career was going to be.
But having this door opened and having other people give you that encouragement gave you the sense that this is something you might succeed at and enjoy.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how much money you make. If you're not happy on what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing it. A lot of us, you look at the people that get on that train every day and go to Manhattan and work, they're not enjoying themselves. They live to work? No, work to live.
We'll take a brief break. We will engage Dan in conversation as well. And you too. Our telephone number is 1-888-TV1-WBIS. We'll take a short break and be right back on New York Calling. Stay with us.
Day 18. Showered with bat.
Drove to ballpark with left hand only.
T-shirt inside out.
Pre-game meal of chicken.
Rubber band on right pinky.
Rub top of groundkeeper's head 3 times.
All right, bring the cheese.
You're out! Socks! Forgot my lucky socks!
Frank Thomas and the White Sox battle the Tribe. Tonight at 7 on S Plus WBIS TV 31.
When it comes to family fun, Six Flags Great Adventure wrote the book. World-class, high-energy, one-of-a-kind Six Flags family springtime fun. Heart-pounding rides, sizzling shows, family adventures. And because we wrote the book on fun, get the family to Six Flags Great Adventure today.
So big, so fast, so close.
So go! Now get these great savings with specially marked Coca-Cola cans.
Bobby?
When I grow up, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to build power plants. I'll design robots that can think. I'll build a tilting train. And then I'll create advanced technologies that reduce pollution to save the world.
Now, Bobby, where could you ever do all that?
ABB.
Hey kids, do you want to be a better basketball player? Come to the Gatorade Knicks Summer Basketball Camp. Join Knicks players Herb Williams, Dante Jones, and Charlie Ward for the hoops experience of a lifetime. Boys and girls can improve their skills at various session locations. Session 1 at the Kings Point Merchant Marine Academy. Session 2 at the College of Staten Island. Session 3 at Connecticut Duquesne High School. And Session 4 at Manhattan College in Riverdale.
Hi, I'm Herb Williams. Please join us for the Gatorade Knicks Basketball Camp. We promise to make you better players. Yeah!
Now there's a program that brings you access to the stories behind the flow of money and the people in our area who are the driving force behind it. MoneyWorks explains money issues and tells you how to use the information. MoneyWorks, weekdays at noon, 2 and 4 on S Plus, WBIS TV 31. Sports, money, and oh yeah, life.
Welcome back to New York Calling. We continue our discussion of sports psychology and encourage your questions and comments. Our telephone number on the screen, 1-888-TV1-WBIS. Let's turn to Dan Gray for a second. You were a professional baseball player for a long time.
Right.
And your motivation came from within yourself. And it's interesting, you said the lack of motivation from your parents was what drove you to succeed. And you're saying that a lack of motivation is as detrimental as too much encouragement from a parent as well.
Well, as we've spoken on the break, I mean, there are several reasons why kids would participate in athletics. And we mentioned it, Mike said, one of the reasons would be money. But I think for me, my motivation came, the emphasis by my parents was on academics. And everything was focused towards academics. And when you don't have the emphasis towards athletics and it's placed on something else, I think it goes the other way. I think it was unique in my case to go to very good academic institutions and yet take it to the next level as far as athletics was concerned.
In terms of, to go back to what we were talking about before, about pressures on kids, why you might choose to go into a career as an athlete, this is something you sort of pursued your whole life and then got to a point where you were doing it and decided you didn't want to do it anymore. What drove you to that point and what made you decide that you wanted to get out?
Well, actually, an injury drove me out. It wasn't voluntarily, but what drove me was really, and Tom mentioned it earlier, that accumulated frustration was very real to me. My worst enemy was always myself. The self-expectations that I have for the level of my performance was always something that drove me to the next level, whether it be from Little League to Sandlot to high school to college to professional. So I always tried to make myself the best player I could be, and I tried not to use any extraneous variables as a blockage to those goals. And I think that was my motivation. It really came from within.
Were you down on yourself after a game? Tom was saying that Michael gets down on himself after a fight. It could have been better. I could have gotten this shot in.
You know, I don't know, but I was shaking my head. I mean, as I said, it's very real to me because we spoke about it earlier. There's an expression in baseball, taking your hitting out onto the field. And occasionally when you would go through slumps as you do in a long season, I mean, that accumulated frustration, whether it be Mike, who has one fight and he doesn't have another fight for 3 or 4 months, or a baseball game where you play 140 games or 160 games in a season and you get to go out the next day, that doesn't make the frustration any easier. I mean, it can build, and it can really be something that becomes a negative aspect on your performance.
Even as far as one pitch to the next pitch, if you get a bad call, there's all sorts of things that happen in your mind as a batter. You're angry, you're distracted, you have to then modify the space of, you have to figure out what the umpire is really perceiving. There's all sorts of negative things that go on that get in the way of focus.
I feel that sports it has to be at least 80% mental.
If not more.
We had discussed earlier that everybody, when you're a pro especially, everybody's at about this level. It's those guys who have that mental edge that get to go to that next level. Those are the guys that will really achieve what their primary goal.
And what happens, excuse me, is what happens from pitch to pitch is when you start taking the control away from yourself and you start placing, Mike talked about it earlier, when you're in a fight, what you want to try to do is take it out of the hands of the judges. Well, it's the same thing in baseball. You're trying to take it out of the hands of the umpire, and you want to really try to focus on the confrontation between the pitcher and the hitter. And when you allow certain variables to come into play, whether it be a bad call, whether it be the weather conditions, whatever it might be, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Our telephone number is 1-888-TV1-WBIS. Let's go to the phones. Mitch joins us from Queens. Good afternoon, Mitch.
How you doing? I just wanted to make a comment about the obsessive compulsiveness about sports.
Right.
And pertaining to myself, what this gentleman said who was sitting next to the boxer is so true. I remember when I was a kid, 14, 15 years old, I played basketball. I would not leave the park if I didn't hit 10 jump shots in a row from the foul line. But that drive carried me to become a great shooter at one time or another. But it was like a sickness, and now I look back at it and I focus and say, gee, I can't believe that I did that, and this is what people do to get better, and it's so true. And it sort of made me feel better when he mentioned that, how players are driven. I didn't want to think like, hey, there was something wrong with me, you know? But it's very, very true.
I think we've proven that there's nothing wrong with you at all, Mitch. That's all right. Thanks for your phone call. Nice to have you with us. 888-TV1-WBIS is the telephone number if you would like to join us in conversation. Does this then translate from the playing field, the boxing ring, the diamond, into life afterwards? In the course, did you find people taking some of these lessons with them?
Well, that's a very controversial issue, and one of the reasons why we wrote Lessons to the Locker Room. I mean, anecdotal evidence given here is very strong, and most athletes would say that they've had a positive experience in sport and they've learned some valuable things. But when you look at the scientific evidence, I couldn't find very much to show that athletes had either negative or positive experiences. I mean, most of the press that we see in athletics is really anecdotal, and we hear about athletes screwing up, or we hear about athletes being very successful. But the overall research that I could find shows that it really didn't have that much effect on building character and things like that, which is, well, surprises most people.
We're going to take a brief break. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. We hope you will join us on your telephone, 1-888-TV1-WBIS. We'll be right back.
Join in the search for adventure and excitement. Watch as the world's preeminent sportsmen guide you to the far reaches of the globe in their pursuit of the ultimate in extreme sports. Outdoor Life's Adventure Quest. Sunday nights at 7 on S+ WBIS TV 31.
The days of fine, thin, and limp hair are over. Now the thick, full, and beautiful hair you've always wanted is at your fingertips. With its exclusive Celluplex formula, thicker, fuller hair penetrates the hair shaft to volumize and strengthen your hair without weighing it down, without any harsh chemicals. Thicker, fuller hair gives you the natural, healthy, and revitalized look you've been searching for. Thicker, fuller hair, nature's answer to fine, thin, and limp hair.
Down here, we have a beach for everybody. Now, see, this is my beach. But over there, a little further, a bit further, that's my dad. And that's his beach. Come play on my island.
I know I'm not who you're expecting, but I am Michael Jordan, chairman of the board of the College Fund. By keeping tuition costs down, bright, deserving kids get a shot at going to college. Because let's face it, no matter how gifted you are,
we all could use a little help. Please support the college fund. Mine is a terrible thing to waste.
Want to go one-on-one?
Heard on the Street AM, heard on the Street PM. Live from the World Financial Center and the New York Stock Exchange. We explain the market, how to profit, reveal the issues that concern you. Weekdays at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on S+, WBIS TV 31. Sports, money, and oh yeah, life.
Welcome back to New York Calling. Our telephone number 888-TV1-WBIS. We're discussing sports psychology and the effect of sports on children. We were talking about how some of those lessons maybe get carried on to life. My question would be, how healthy, I was focused on some of the positive aspects of sports for kids too. We don't want to give it a negative stigma. How healthy is it? How hard should you push? It's not winning is everything, but how hard should you encourage a kid? How much should you strive for them to do well, or should you just sit back and let them have fun out there on the field?
I feel you should sit back and let them, you know, if that's what they want to do, then that's what they're going to do. Especially as a child, the child's going to do what he or she wants to do anyway. So the more you push, like in Dan's case, they push towards academics, he went the other way.
Right. I think that
which is, you're very pleased with that. Yeah, that's good.
Generally, we have to fall on the side of sports being a very, very positive thing developmentally. Sports gets children out of the house, out of the maternal matrix, they call it. What else does that other than academics? Sports in the teen years is called the transitional space. It gets children to move into an organized social setting where there's tremendous socialization going on, learning going on, physical fitness going on, and fun going on. It gets them out of the house. It moves them towards work and adulthood, and it serves a critical function in this society.
True. Is there too much emphasis on sports? You guys were successful athletes in junior high school, post-school.
I think what it is that children have to realize, and as do the parents, that it's good to...
Yes, let's turn to Dan Gray for a second. You were a professional baseball player for a long time.
Right.
And your motivation came from within yourself. And it's interesting, you said the lack of motivation from your parents was what drove you to succeed. And you're saying that a lack of motivation is as detrimental as too much encouragement from a parent as well.
Well, as we've spoken on the break, I mean, there are several reasons why kids would participate in athletics. And we mentioned it, Mike said, one of the reasons would be money. But I think for me, my motivation came, the emphasis by my parents was on academics. And everything was focused towards academics. And when you don't have the emphasis towards athletics and it's placed on something else, I think it goes the other way. I think it was unique in my case to go to very good academic institutions and yet take it to the next level as far as athletics was concerned.
In terms of, to go back to what we were talking about before, about pressures on kids, why you might choose to go into a career as an athlete, this is something you sort of pursued your whole life and then got to a point where you were doing it and decided you didn't want to do it anymore. What drove you to that point, and what made you decide that you wanted to get out?
Well, actually, an injury drove me out. It wasn't voluntarily, but what drove me was really, and Tom mentioned it earlier, that accumulated frustration was very real to me. My worst enemy was always myself. The self-expectations that I have for the level of my performance was always something that drove me to the next level, whether it be from Little League to Sandlot to high school to college to professional. So I always tried to make myself the best player I could be, and I tried not to use any extraneous variables as a blockage to those goals. And I think that was my motivation. It really came from within.
Were you down on yourself after a game? Tom was saying that Michael gets down on himself after a fight. I could have been better. I could have gotten this shot in.
You know, I don't know, but I was shaking my head. I mean, as I said, it's very real to me because we spoke about it earlier. There's an expression in baseball, taking your hitting out onto the field. And occasionally when you would go through slumps as you do in a long season, I mean, that accumulated frustration, whether it be Mike, who has one fight and he doesn't have another fight for 3 or 4 months, or a baseball game where you play 140 games or 160 games in a season and you get to go out the next day, that doesn't make the frustration any easier. I mean, it can build, and it can really be something that becomes a negative aspect on your performance.
Even as far as one pitch to the next pitch, if you get a bad call, there's all sorts of things that happen in your mind as a batter. You're angry, you're distracted, you have to then modify the space of, you have to figure out what the umpire is really perceiving. There's all sorts of negative things that go on that get in the way of focus.
I feel that sports it has to be at least 80% mental.
If not more.
We had discussed earlier that everybody, when you're a pro especially, everybody's at about this level. It's those guys who have that mental edge that get to go to that next level. Those are the guys that will really achieve what their primary goal.
And what happens, excuse me, is what happens from pitch to pitch is when you start taking the control away from yourself and you start placing, Mike talked about it earlier, when you're in a fight, what you want to try to do is take it out of the hands of the judges. Well, it's the same thing in baseball. You're trying to take it out of the hands of the umpire, and you want to really try to focus on the confrontation between the pitcher and the hitter. And when you allow certain variables to come into play, whether it be a bad call, whether it be the weather conditions, whatever it might be, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Our telephone number is 1-888-TV1-WBIS. Let's go to the phones. Mitch joins us from Queens. Good afternoon, Mitch.
How you doing? I just wanted to make a comment about the obsessive compulsiveness about sports.
Right.
And pertaining to myself, what this gentleman said who was sitting next to the boxer is so true. I remember when I was a kid, 14, 15 years old, I played basketball. I would not leave the park if I didn't hit 10 jump shots in a row from the foul line. But that drive carried me to become a great shooter at one time or another. But it was like a sickness, and now I look back at it and I focus and say, gee, I can't believe that I did that, and this is what people do to get better, and it's so true. And it sort of made me feel better when he mentioned that, how players are driven. I didn't want to think like, hey, there was something wrong with me, you know? But it's very, very true.
I think we've proven that there's nothing wrong with you at all, Mitch. That's all right. Thanks for your phone call. Nice to have you with us. 888-TV1-WBIS is the telephone number if you would like to join us in conversation. Does this then translate from the playing field, the boxing ring, the diamond, into life afterwards? In the course, did you find people taking some of these lessons with them?
Well, that's a very controversial issue, and one of the reasons why we wrote Lessons to the Locker Room. I mean, anecdotal evidence given here is very strong, and most athletes would say that they've had a positive experience in sport and they've learned some valuable things. But when you look at the scientific evidence, I couldn't find very much to show that athletes had either negative or positive experiences. I mean, most of the press that we see in athletics is really anecdotal, and we hear about athletes screwing up, or we hear about athletes being very successful. But the overall research that I could find shows that it really didn't have that much effect on building character and things like that, which is, well, surprises most people.
We're going to take a brief break. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. We hope you will join us on your telephone, 1-888-TV1-WBIS. We'll be right back.
Day 18. Showered with bat.
Drove to ballpark with left hand only.
T-shirt inside out.
Pre-game meal of chicken.
Rubber band on right pinky.
Rub top of groundskeeper's head 3 times.
All right, bring the cheese.
You're out! Socks! Forgot my lucky socks!
Frank Thomas and the White Sox battle the Tribe. Tonight at 7 on S+ WBIS TV 31.
You've spent your entire life sleeping in an old-fashioned flat bed, but now you have the opportunity to find out about a better, healthier way to relax and sleep. Get this free information kit about Craftmatic adjustable beds. Call toll-free and a helpful operator will mail you a free Craftmatic adjustable bed catalog and this special rebate certificate. It's worth $200 off any Craftmatic Model 1 adjustable bed. Why is Craftmatic making this rebate offer? It's our way of saying thanks for taking the time to find out about Craftmatic. There is, of course, absolutely no obligation for calling toll-free and requesting this helpful information kit. So if you have any interest in adjustable beds, pick up your phone and call now.
Call toll-free 1-800-832-0400. That's 1-800-832-0400. Toll-free 1-800-832-0400.
Here you go.
Thanks.
I travel a lot. But you don't have to play in the NBA to visit new places and meet new people. All you have to do is pick up a book, because when you know how to read, adventures come to you.
Today's story is Little Shaq Horner.
So no matter who you are or what you plan to do, learn how to read. It opens up a whole new world.
Shaq's gonna be some.
It's a good thing he doesn't play basketball.
Welcome back to New York Calling. Our telephone number 888-TV1-WBIS. We're discussing sports psychology and the effect of sports on children. We were talking about how some of those lessons maybe get carried on to life. My question would be, how healthy, I was focused on some of the positive aspects of sports for kids too. We don't want to give it a negative stigma. How healthy is it? How hard should you push? It's not winning is everything, but how hard should you encourage a kid? How much should you strive for them to do well, or should you just sit back and let them have fun out there on the field?
I feel you should sit back and let them, if that's what they want to do, then that's what they're going to do. Especially as a child, the child's going to do what he or she wants to do anyway. So the more you push, like in Dan's case, they push towards academics, he went the other way.
Right. I think that
you're very pleased with that. Yeah, that's good.
Generally, we have to fall on the side of sports being a very, very positive thing developmentally. Sports gets children out of the house, out of the maternal matrix, they call it. What else does that other than academics? Sports in the teen years is called the transitional space. It gets children to move into an organized social setting where there's tremendous socialization going on, learning going on, physical fitness going on, and fun going on. It gets them out of the house. It moves them towards work and adulthood, and it serves a critical function in this society.
True. Is there too much emphasis on sports? You guys were successful athletes in junior high school, post-school.
I think what it is that children have to realize, and as do the parents, that it's good to go towards a goal. If you want to be a professional athlete, that's great. But there's life before, during, and after. Just because you became a professional baseball player, professional fighter, the Michael Jordans of the world, there has to be something else other than athletics.
I'm sorry. I think the main concern comes in when you have, and we'll take the Little League as an example. The major concerns, I think, are when the parents, when the games and the entire scope of what's happening becomes more important to the parents than it does to the kids who are playing. And there are several cases of that. In fact, recently, I'm sure you know, I was reading in the paper that a kid who played for the Mets just decided just decided that he just didn't have the interest, and his parents had pushed him to the point where he decided he didn't want to play anymore.
Right. You guys are familiar with this story. He goes through high school, college. His parents are pushing him the whole time. He gets a $800,000 contract with the Mets to play shortstop. Takes the contract, and then basically a year into it says, I don't want to play baseball anymore.
Right. Never really
liked it, never wanted to play. Same sort of situation with Todd Marinovich, who was a quarterback in college. Great college athlete, gets picked up to the pros, but basically was burnt out by the time he was a professional, because from the time he was 5, his parents had him on a restrictive diet. It was all about practice and working on the arm and working on the game.
You see that happen an awful lot in gymnastics. The parents are pushing, because it costs a lot of money to send them through gymnastic training, and the kids just get burnt out.
Well, it happens in all sports. And I'd sort of endorse what Tom said earlier about sport being positive, but I'd also have some restraints about what I said. Sport can teach very positive things, but it can also teach very negative things, and there's nothing that's going to ensure that kids are going to have a positive experience, and there's nothing that's going to ensure that kids are going to have a negative experience. What we need is people who are interested in the kids' welfare, coaches, parents, sports psychologists, who will try to make this a positive experience, because it isn't guaranteed.
And what did your research expose? Because it's a good point. There's coaches who, if kids are seriously training, let's say for Olympics, you mentioned gymnastics, that's a long road to get to that level of competition. As opposed to coaches in Little League, I think people would like to win, but it's still, you're going to play 12 games, you're 11 years old.
I recall when I was a child playing Little League football and Little League baseball, parents, coaches screaming and yelling at their kids. I remember one time a parent actually spanked his kid because he didn't get a hit.
I would say this, that We certainly can talk about the overcompetitiveness of the American society, and that sports certainly inherits that ideology. But I also think we need to understand and respond to the first question, is sports becoming too much of an obsession in America? I think on the broadest sociological level, what's going on is that we're now containing more than ever before our sense of aggression and violence. We no longer lose men to war in this country. We've only lost 600 people in the last 20 years to war. In addition, the sexual revolution is now suppressed as a result of AIDS and too much divorce. And so you have all of that energy now, all of that sexual and aggressive energy being contained, and that's why we're obsessed with sports. It contains that instinctual energy, and to very good effect. Certainly there's burnout, there's injuries that occur, but far better than to have people acting out sexually or to die in war.
Well, let me jump in for one second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're going to have to take a brief break for an S Plus News update. We will continue our conversation and get to your phone calls. 1-888-TV1. WBIS is our number. We'll continue our discussion in just a moment.
A whole new force in home video is set to hit your VCR. Introducing the Modern Warriors Video Collection from Time Life Video. Featuring 5 of today's most powerful warriors. Beginning with the toughest of them all, Sylvester Stallone. Start with Rambo, First Blood for just $9.99, where Stallone is sent back to Vietnam.
Do we get to win this time?
In search of PLWs, he ends up finding the enemy and his own government.
Murdoch, I'm coming to get you.
Then in Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger is the ultimate killing machine.
It can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, and it absolutely will not stop.
You can also get Steven Seagal in Above the Law, where he puts his 6th-degree black belt to work against ex-CIA drug smugglers.
You guys think you're above the law. You ain't above mine.
In Missing in Action, Chuck Norris lights up the jungle with a daring rescue of MIAs.
We're going home. Damn right.
And in Bloodsport, Jean-Claude Van Damme stars in this true story about the first Westerner ever to win the lethal full-contact Kumite competition. Start with Rambo, First Blood for just $9.99. Order with your credit card, and we'll send you as a bonus the movie that started it all, Sylvester Stallone in the original Rambo, absolutely free. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Seagal, Norris, Van Damme. 5 bad hombres. 1 nasty video collection.
I'll be back.
The Modern Warriors. Put them on your shelf for the ultimate in home security. From Time Life Video.
To order Modern Warriors, call 1-800-978-9292. Use your credit card and receive Rambo First Blood Part 1 free, or send $9.99 plus $3.49 shipping and handling to Modern Warriors, Department 1, Richmond, Virginia, 23280.
Good afternoon. I'm Martha McCallum with an S Plus update. New signs that inflation may still be under wraps are sending stocks soaring today. We've got the Dow up 51 points. The Nasdaq is up 9. This morning's weekly jobless reading rose more than expected, and chain store sales cooled a bit last month. That has Wall Street optimistic about tomorrow's jobs numbers for May. A bit more caution in the bond market, though. The long bond is unchanged this afternoon, 6.88%. Well, in sports, reports say that later today, PJ Carlesimo will be named the Warriors' new head coach. And at the French Open, the women's final is set. Top seed Martina Hingis advances after beating Monica Seles in 3 sets. Hingis will face 9th seed Eva Maioli on Saturday. The Mets lead the Marlins right now 4-0 in the 7th. Armando Reynoso has just given up 2 hits. That's it for now from the S Plus newsroom. I'm Martha McCallum.
Heard on the Street AM, heard on the Street PM. Live from the World Financial Center of the New York Stock Exchange. We explain the market, how to profit, reveal the issues that concern you. Weekdays at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on S Plus, WBIS TV 31. Sports, money, and oh yeah, life.
You're watching S Plus, WBIS TV 31. Join in the search for adventure and excitement. Watch as the world's preeminent sportsmen guide you to the far reaches of the globe in their pursuit of the ultimate in extreme sports. Outdoor Life's Adventure Quest. Sunday nights at 7 on S Plus, WBIS TV 31.
Welcome back to New York Calling. I'm Josh Binswanger. We continue our discussion now of sports psychology with Dr. Tom Ferraro, a sports psychologist who specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of professional athletes, Professor Roger Rees, author of Lessons of the Locker Room, Michael Corleone, the International Boxing Organization's welterweight champion, and Daniel Gray, a former professional baseball player who also holds a degree in sports management. And I wanted to give Roger a chance to respond to what Tom was saying as we went to break.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, one of the problems, it seems to me, with sport is that we have suggested that it can solve all our social problems, from delinquency to education to what have you. And rather, I think what sport does is reflect the social problems that we have in society. So I don't know that it so much, it's not a sort of a substitute for war or helping to deal with sexual problems, as rather that the social problems that we have come out in sport rather than sport solving any of these problems.
All right.
Well, I would basically say that that the value of it, and the reason that we're in a sports revolution, is that we need to have it to contain the two major issues for human beings, which is what are you going to do with your hatred, and what are you going to do with your love life, what are you going to do with your sexuality. And we've seen what the 60s and 70s have done as far as sex is concerned. We've had a massive epidemic of divorce, and that's based on the sexual revolution. And we've seen what's happened in World War II, and we've decided after the Vietnam War that aggression is not a good thing. We have to contain it, and we're no longer sacrificing our young men at war at this point.
Well, we aren't, but on the other hand, you learn that aggression pays in sports. You learn how to be aggressive in sports, and I don't see sports solving divorce rates. I mean, the issue of sexuality in sports is certainly a very important issue, and I mean, athletes are in the forefront of some of the problems that are concerned with date rape and things like that. So I tend to see the problem as more complex than just being positive.
Well, you mentioned the term pay, and certainly the glorification and the marketing sides of sports have grown exponentially in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, we have seen a huge boom. Michael Jordan is making upwards of $100 million a year in endorsements and salary and everything else. Mike Tyson's pulling down $35 million for one fight. I mean, the numbers are staggering.
Show me the money. Yeah, and I do think that contaminates what sports are about, which is play. That's the other side that we were talking about before, that's the message. How can you live a life playfully and joyfully? And certainly that's what sports is about. It's not an important experience, but yet, so it's fun. It's not oppressive. It's not stress related. And when you have a lot of marketing and money involved in sports, it tends to contaminate that message, which I think you alluded to before. What's the message in sports?
That message gets lost in terms of money and winning.
I think the saturation of it in as far as the marketing is concerned, I think the concept that is overwhelming now, in speaking about team sports, that there's a saying that there's no I in team, but there's an M and an E. And I think what happens is you get that me concept, and it really trickles down to the younger levels as far as, you know, little leagues. It doesn't matter what sport it is, and I think that's really contaminating the message.
Let's go to some of our phone calls. 1-888-TV1 WBIS is our number. Let's go to Jackie in Manhattan. Good afternoon, Jackie.
Good afternoon, Josh. How are you? I had a question here for Doc Tom and Prof. Rees there about why does it seem that so many of these professional athletes seem to think that they're above the law? I mean, there's a lot of they get in a lot of trouble. Mike Tyson had his legal trouble. Wilt Chamberlain. Why do they seem to have these attitudes? A lot of them have records.
Right. I don't think Wilt Chamberlain got into any trouble with the law. There are certainly others out there who have had various brushes.
If you don't mind if I answer this question. I think society is who puts us above the law. We don't put ourselves above the law. Society allows us to think that we're above the law. We don't think we're above the law. We're here to play a game or a sport. As far as putting us above the law, as far as what happened with Mike Tyson, this happens every day. Go to your local police precinct and ask them how many date rapes they have, how many murders, how many robberies, how many cocaine addicts they got in their precincts. Just that we're in the limelight. So therefore, some of us, I know I have no problems, some of us stay clean, and some of us don't. There is also, but you have to keep in mind that being a professional athlete, because we're in the limelight, yes, some of us do make a lot of money. but there's a lot of pressure put on us. I mean, the media, the first thing the media wants to do is not what kid's hand did you shake and take a picture and do what kind of charity you did, but what kind of domestic problems you have, what kind of legal trouble you may fall into.
You've touched on a number of different things. I mean, first of all, there is the thought that because of the attention and the adulation, society is placing you at a level above other citizens. There's a level of celebrity involved here that separates you. And I remember when you were on a championship team, when you were playing pro ball, single A ball, it was a great experience. Everybody in town knew you, they all loved you. Then you go to another city where it's not as big a deal. It's like, hey, what the hell's wrong here? How come I'm not getting the attention I used to get? That's one point. I think also, in terms of the level of narcissism to a certain extent that takes place with some of these folks. They begin to believe their own press and suddenly believe that they can do whatever they want to do and that there should be no repercussions because of who they are.
The media and society is putting that on us. We're not doing it ourselves.
But there's got to be some culpability there somewhere.
Let me make a comment about narcissism, because the question is about narcissism. And narcissism is not only contained in sports and professional sports. Narcissism is the major psychological problem that the country is facing over the last 30 years or so. We're no longer involved in social experiences. We talked about the disintegration of the family, the disintegration of the community. The social is no longer very, very important for America. The individual is important, the self. And when you have total focus on the self, you have narcissism, you have self-involvement. And when you have an extreme amount of that, you have entitlement, you have I'm above the law, I make the law myself, you have rage when that narcissistic individual is insulted in any way, and you have different problems related to narcissism. And so the question is not so much about sports per se as about the society generally and what it's facing. But
another issue that Michael sort of touched on also is the role model status that a lot of athletes get, maybe fairly or unfairly saddled with. Companies have taken advantage of that, with Charles Barkley saying, "I am not a role model. I play professional basketball."
Let me just. My main issue is a couple of years ago he took some flack for that statement. I think in theory I tend to agree with him. To me, professional athletes, in theory, are not role models. They're heroes. And its effect on children is we can emulate their athletic ability. I mean, it's something Michael Jordan does athletic feats that most of us can't even come close to.
Right.
You know, role models should be people who have characteristic traits
like
and personality traits that you see on a daily basis that you can emulate and try to be like when you get to be a certain age. I think what's happened is because there's put such a saturation of it on the market, and that there's been such an emphasis placed on it, that it's not in theory, it's in practice. And whether Charles Barkley wants to accept it or not, athletes are role models, and they have to come to that.
But society should not put that on us.
But should is my fault. Should, could, would. Actually, let's deal with what happens. And what happens is, I think, as Dan says, athletes are looked up to as total people, not just for their athletic feats. And consequently, their behavior is very much copied, whether that behavior is antisocial or not. To answer Jackie's point a little bit, if we place athletes on a pedestal, and you say society, Mike, but what is society? Society is educators, society is parents, society is coaches, society is us. That society idea is a cop-out. It's people that are doing this, not society.
Well,
you know?
Exactly. Let me tell you something. I spent Christmas morning up at the Nassau County Medical Center in the hospital burn unit, giving one of those Tickle Me Elmo dolls to a little kid named Joey Martin who had suffered 80-degree burns. Was there any media there? No. Was there any media when I donated a portion of my proceeds to a young woman who got hit by a car? No. But the media is right there. If I would have robbed a bank, if I would have went and knocked over a grocery store. So, you know, media plays a big part in how.
They're looking. It's a situation. It's a cyclical situation of building up and tearing down, building up and tearing down, and maybe we have become a bit more cynical today. 1950s, you look at people like Jackie Robinson, people like Mickey Mantle. Now, Mickey Mantle went out and had a fine time every night till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and everybody thought he's just a lovable guy who's just blowing off some steam after the game. Today, maybe you could get away with that behavior, maybe you couldn't. Is it, I mean, is it safe to say that the scrutiny of athletes and heroes or role models has been raised to such a level that they cannot possibly live a normal life? Or is it because they get so much notoriety, they get so much money that people believe they should behave in a different fashion?
I don't believe in the scrutiny of individual athletes. Goodness knows the press can do that very easily. But I do believe in critically examining the socialization that goes into sports and some of the lessons that are learned through sports. In the book, we traced how this idea that sports build character got going, where it came from, and how it came from Britain, and how it got changed in America to be winning in sports builds character. And so if athletes are heroes, if athletes win and win and win, and we live vicariously through that victory, then it doesn't strike me as strange that athletes get to think that they are above the law, as you started out this section with. And there are plenty of examples and anecdotes of that in the research that we found.
Okay. I've got a break for 1 second. Our telephone number is 1-888-TV1-WBIS. We'll get the calls from Joe in the Bronx and you as well. You're watching New York Calling on S+. We'll be right back.
You can't get the Wall Street Journal on the weekend, but you can watch the Wall Street Journal Report every Sunday on S+. Hosted by Consuelo Mack, the Wall Street Journal Report is the weekly magazine program covering the world of business, finance, and consumer news. The Wall Street Journal Report, backed by the hundreds of journalists and editors working for the most trusted name in journalism. Intelligent discussion about the issues concerning your career, your home, your finances. The Wall Street Journal Report, Sundays at 8:30 on S+, WBIS TV 31. Sports, money, and oh yeah, life.
Down here, we have a beach for everybody. Now, see, this is my beach. But over there, a little further, a bit further, that's my dad. And that's his beach. Come play on my island.
If there's one thing life has taught me, it's that what you dream you can do. But it's never an easy road. There are lots of things that can trip you up and tear you down. Like drugs. Sure, drugs are out there, sure they're tempting, but drugs are a lie. Don't fall for that lie and let drugs destroy you and your dreams. You're smarter than that. You're better than that. Don't be stupid. Don't do drugs.
10,000 eyes are on me.
Do it, Casey, do it.
Shouting, Casey, go all the way.
Casey, do it. Come on, Casey.
First base, second base, third base. Make your move today. Do it, Casey, do it. Score mighty, Casey, score.
Score.
I just don't get it. Is that what girls are for?
If you don't talk with your kids about sex, who will? Our free booklet can help.
Welcome back to New York Calling. We continue our conversation, and Tom, you wanted to respond.
Well, basically the conversation has gotten into the issue of role models. Should athletes be role models? What is the notion of a hero? What is it all about? And the first thought I had is maybe sports are simply entertainment, and as simple as that. Professional athletes are entertainers. However, I really don't think that's the case. I do think that the issue of heroism is critically important, and that what I believe as a psychoanalyst is that the model of the great athlete goes deeply into the unconscious of the culture, and it actually does war with various problems in the unconscious. Jackie Robinson is a perfect example of that. A great black athlete. I think that black athleticism is the essential ingredient that's going to move the culture towards integration, towards the acceptance of the beauty and the greatness of blacks. So that's one example of what heroism really is about. Heroism is about entering the unconscious of the culture and figuring out what the problems are in the unconscious that are denied, i.e. in this case racism, and doing something about it. And the people that admire, like a Michael Jackson or Michael Jordan, or both of them for that matter, or Tiger Woods, if there's a racist attitude in them, they're in conflict automatically in their unconscious related to that. And when you have a dialectic then, which is where the media comes in, talking about these things, that moves the culture towards integration, towards equality, which is the essential American mandate.
Okay, I've got to get a chance to get some of our callers in as well. Let's go to Gerard in Brooklyn. Good afternoon, Gerard.
Good afternoon. I have a question for Michael Corleone and Roger Rees. I think the missing player, so to speak, here has been the spectator. Do you think the spectator, with his fanaticism, his zeal, Generation X, the suppressed sexual desires, are driving the images of sports athletes, and it's more coming from the society, from the fan, than it is from the participants? I'd like your opinions on that.
All right, Gerard, thanks for your call.
Well, I think that the fans do expect a little more from us than what we can actually give them. You mentioned before that we were entertainers. We're out there doing the best that we can. Don't think for 1 second if you can't hit a home run, you're not going to hit that home run. We want to do the best we can. That's what we're there for. We're perfectionists. If we can't, then we can't. And the fan doesn't understand that. Fan's like, how did you miss that pitch? Or how come you couldn't knock that bum out? We're doing the best we can.
Yeah, spectators, obviously, most of them haven't experienced sports as Mike have or Dan. And consequently, it's more easy for them to criticize athletes without knowing what goes on. In the Little League workshops that we do, we particularly try to point out how difficult baseball is for little kids, and how a unbelievable success ratio is being successful 30% of the time. I'm not sure that spectators can be singled out as as Gerard wants to do, as the main thing that is causing problems in sports. There are all sorts of issues around spectators. The spectators can become violent if they don't get what they want, but at the same time there are other things in sports violence without spectators. So certainly spectators is an issue, but it's one of a much larger number of issues that confront sport.
Let's go back to our phones. We have Joe with us from the Bronx. Good afternoon, Joe.
How you doing, guys?
Good, thanks.
Great. First off, I want to say hi to Danny. I played professional ball for 3 years. I did play against Danny. So, Danny,
How you doing,
remember? What's up, buddy? What I want to touch on, fellas, is basically, what do you think we should do with our high school athletes? Because from my standpoint, I was also a college head baseball coach a couple of years ago. And what I see from myself being a high school athlete and being a college coach receiving these high school athletes is the lack of a perception of exactly what the professional game is about, how to get adjusted, how to really understand that, I might not be a pro athlete. What am I going to do after that? Because when I was a high school athlete, I got to tell you, the only thing I thought about when I realized there were scouts coming to see me was, I can't play college, I can't play pro, but I wasn't worried about anything else. And I was totally consumed in that. And I came from a single-parent family, and if your coach isn't really there guiding you, these kids are alone. I don't see any counselors for athletes in the high school. And I think in our society right now, we might have to make a change. Sports has become so intense and competitive that they might be the need for that support group now starting in the high school level. It really wasn't even there in college.
Okay,
what do you guys think?
Appreciate your call.
Yeah, very good point, actually. This book is about high school sports. But generally speaking, I mean, Joe's not alone. Most high school athletes, because of the hype around sports, think of themselves as a chance to become a professional athlete, be successful, and make a lot of money. To me, if parents haven't got the right perspective, like Dan's parents and he referred to earlier, or the coaches don't have the right perspective, the athlete is, or the kid is in trouble. Certainly coaches need to be more understanding and I think stress particular point that we started off with, which was we all agreed on the enjoyment of sport, that is the thing which is fueling the involvement. Right. People need to want to enjoy sports. Okay, so maybe you're going to make some money out of it, but you probably aren't, and therefore enjoy the process.
Right. I got a break for a commercial. We'll take a brief break and come back with more of New York Calling. Stay with us.
Which S Plus program addresses the issues important to all of New York? Metro Journal. Which program takes time to discuss and present the entire story from both sides? Metro Journal. New York issues on a New York station. On S Plus, Sundays at 9 a.m. hosted by Betsy Stark. More than just soundbite coverage. Every week, count on Metro Journal for the city's most in-depth reporting on the events, the issues, and the people on everyone's mind. Metro Journal. Sundays at 9 a.m. on S Plus, WBIS TV 31. Sports, money, and oh yeah, life.
I didn't grow up in this neighborhood. I'm from a small town in North Carolina. But some things here are just like home. Sure, every community has problems. But when everyone works together, it doesn't matter where you're from. So team up with your community. Even if you are the new guy in town.
There's a time and a place to be aggressive. Now that's cool. That's uncool. Cool. Uncool. Cool. Now that's uncool. Take it out on the field, not on each other. There's nothing cool about violence.
The city is like a machine with a heartbeat, fueled by money and driven by people just like you. Now there's a program that brings you access to the stories behind the flow of money and the people in our area who are the driving force behind it. MoneyWorks explains money issues and tells you how to use the information for your family, for yourself. MoneyWorks, weekdays at noon, 2 and 4 on S Plus WBIS TV 31. We give you sports, money, and oh yeah, life.
Welcome back to New York Calling. Just a few more minutes to go. You played ball with Joe a couple years back. You've also been an assistant baseball coach at the college level. Right. How would you respond to the point that he was making?
Well, I think it's an excellent point, and I think that he's really showing where we where at that level where we lack the passion that coaches should have at that level, because it's so vital, and not only for your athletic performance and your development, but to just be a well-rounded individual.
But how do you teach kids, as Roger was saying, that it's not all going to be rosy at the top? The Mets just hired another kid, signed another kid right out of high school. He's a senior this year. Now he's going to go through their farm system because I think they can mold him better than a college. But when you're playing ball with a kid like that and you see him jump from senior high school right to the pros, that's got to give you a big ray of hope.
Well, I think that the important message here and the important thing that we're talking about is how do parents parent well? What do they do with their children? And if the child is looking to define self-esteem and self-identity exclusively and compulsively through sports, it may have something to do with an inner sense of doubt and emptiness. We live in a culture where most parents work now, and children systematically, certainly Generation X, has been neglected and basically abandoned, this whole culture. And so you have
by the TV.
Yeah, and so you have emptiness and lack of self-esteem, and so I would certainly communicate to the parents, spend time with the child and support the self, mirror the child's efforts and the child's strengths, and that will go a long way in preventing kind of this compulsive, overwrought attitude towards money and professionalism in sports, which is obviously highly unrealistic.
Let me just say real quick, Josh, that I also think that it's really, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. These organizations make a lot of money, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they make a lot of money, and I think what's happening is they're exploiting these young athletes, and I think, as far as we were talking about earlier, the young high school kids coming out into the NBA, I think that issue has to be addressed by the NBA. And I was never a big advocate of baseball players coming out right after high school. I think that it should be a minimum of after your junior year at college that you're eligible to come out. So I think these issues have to be addressed by these organizations that are really making a lot of money off these kids.
I don't think these kids can handle the pressures. There's a reason why you have to be 21 years old to drink. There's a reason why you have to be a certain age before you join the military or to vote, because you have to become an adult. They should not be putting these kids in the pro. They can't handle the pressure. Next thing you know, they're becoming drug addicts, alcoholics, or they can't handle the pressure.
Your point also carries over to that parenting question, which is talking about this stuff with your kids, whether or not they want to become a professional athlete. But if they see somebody on television who they might deem to be a role model or someone to look up to, Clarify that. Talk about it with them so that they're not getting the wrong impression.
I'd like to say that as a role model, don't look at the athlete. Look at your my father. I can't think of a better role model. That's who I want to be like. Do I like the way Mike Tyson throws a left hook? Yes, I do.
Right.
Do I like the way Michael Jordan slam dunks? Yes, I do. But my father's my role model.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we want to give a quick plug. You're fighting 2 weeks at Foxwoods Casino.
2 weeks, Foxwoods Casinos. That's about it.
Come check it out.
Come check
Gentlemen,
it out.
thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here. My thanks to Dr. Tom Ferraro, Professor Roger Rees, Michael Corleone, Dan Gray. Pleasure to have you all with us. Nice to have you. Tomorrow on New York Calling, we'll take an inside look at the world of publishing. We certainly hope you join us tomorrow afternoon. I'm Josh Binswanger. Thank you for making us a part of your day. You're watching S+. Have a good afternoon.